He slid the place card toward my son with 2 fingers, the paper catching a bit of candle wax on the linen as it stopped. The name on it wasn't his. It wasn't anyone he was anymore. Eli stared at it without touching it, his shoulders pulled in tight, the knot of his tie sitting just a little too neat for a boy trying to pretend he wasn't shaking inside. I heard the scrape of a chair behind us. It wasn't loud, but it cut through the room like someone snapping a twig on purpose. A couple of guests paused mid-conversation. No one said a word. I walked the card back to Marissa. She was standing near the dessert table, fixing the angle of a centerpiece, like nothing in the world was wrong. She didn't even turn when I stopped beside her. I set the card down in front of her. "This isn't his name." She didn't look at it. She just said, "It's the name he was given. I'm not playing pretend today." Her voice was soft, almost bored, like she was correcting a place setting instead of cutting into my son. Something in my chest tightened, not sharp, not sudden, just steady enough to burn. I told her we were leaving. She finally looked up, eyes cold, jaw tight. "Don't you make a scene at my wedding. He can play boy tomorrow." The fork in her hand slipped and tapped the plate. A tiny sound, enough to break whatever was left. Eli deserves better than this. Eli stayed by the table, his hands tucked into his pockets like he was trying to hide inside his own sleeves. Caleb and Jonah hovered close to him, their eyes fixed on me, waiting for whatever came next. The music kept playing, something light and polished, but it didn't fit the air around us anymore. A few relatives glanced over, pretending they were only checking the buffet line. They weren't. They felt the shift too. I leaned down to Eli. His jaw was set, but his eyes were locked on the card. "We're not staying," I said. He nodded once, small, like he didn't trust his voice. Caleb touched his shoulder. Jonah reached for his bag. They didn't argue. They didn't ask if we should try to fix things. They knew this road. They'd walked beside him for years. As we stepped away from the table, Marissa's husband, Daniel, blocked the aisle. He didn't say hello. He didn't even blink. "She worked hard for this day," he said. "Let it go." The way he said it, like respecting my son was some unreasonable demand, knocked something loose inside me. I kept my voice low. "Move," he smirked, just a small curl at the corner of his mouth, and stepped aside like he was doing me a favor. Eli brushed past him, shoulders tight, head down. The lights from the chandelier caught the side of his face, and for a second I saw how much it cost him not to cry. We walked toward the exit, the room too bright, too quiet. Eli stopped a few steps from the door, not because he wanted to, but because my Aunt Ruth called out his old name across the room. She didn't shout. She didn't need to. The way the sound floated over the music felt deliberate, like she wanted it to land where everyone could hear. Eli's back stiffened. Jonah whispered, "Don't listen to her." But it was too late. The damage was already done. I turned toward her. She stood beside the bar, one hand on her glass, eyes narrow like she was solving a puzzle that shouldn't exist. "I don't understand why we all have to go along with this," she said, not even lowering her voice. "It's confusing. For everyone." A couple of guests heard and shifted uncomfortably, but no one corrected her. No one stepped in. No one said his name. Eli didn't move. Caleb stepped between them, shoulders squared, voice low. "He's Eli, that's it." Ruth gave a small laugh, sharp and dismissive. "Kids go through phases." I walked back toward her before the words settled. She held her ground, but her fingers tightened around the glass. "This isn't your place," I said. She raised an eyebrow. "I'm family. I get to have an opinion." I felt something inside me cool, not rage, just a quiet line being drawn. Not about my son. Behind me, Eli wiped his face with the back of his hand, quick, hoping no one noticed. Caleb noticed. Jonah noticed. That was enough. I turned away from my aunt and motioned to the boys. "Let's go." The room felt heavier with every step, like the air itself didn't want us to leave cleanly. Caleb pushed the door open, but before we stepped outside, my cousin Linda hurried over, heels clicking too fast on the polished floor. She caught my arm, fingers tight, eyes wide with the kind of panic people get when they care more about appearances than people. "Daniel, please," she whispered. "If you walk out now, everyone will talk. Marissa is already upset." I pulled my arm back, not hard, just enough. She put his dead name on the table. Linda blinked, like she hadn't even processed that part. "Maybe it was a mistake," she said. The way she said it, light, dismissive, told me she didn't believe it or didn't want to. Behind her, the DJ lowered the music for a speech. A cheer went up from the far side of the room, completely disconnected from the small storm happening here at the door. Eli flinched at the sudden noise. Jonah stepped closer to him. Caleb shot me a look, a quiet question. Are we really still talking to them? I told Linda, "I'm taking my sons home." She sighed like I was being unreasonable. "You're really ruining the mood, you know that." That sentence hit differently. Not sharp, just empty. It showed exactly where her loyalty stood. With the room, not with the child crying quietly behind me. I stepped past her. She didn't follow. The cool air slipped in as Caleb held the door open wider. Eli hesitated on the threshold, not because he wanted to stay, but because he wasn't sure if leaving would make it worse for everyone or better for himself. That hesitation from a 15-year-old boy, one who just wanted to exist, felt heavier than anything anyone in that room had said. I touched his back, a small, steady pressure. "We're done here." He nodded and stepped outside. The parking lot was washed in that dim evening light that makes everything look a little colder than it should. Jonah walked ahead, kicking at a stray leaf on the asphalt, trying to act normal. Caleb stayed close to Eli, matching his pace, not saying anything unless Eli needed it. The quiet between them wasn't uncomfortable. It was protective. I unlocked the car, but Eli didn't get in. He stood beside the open door, hands gripping the frame, knuckles pale. His tie was crooked now, like he'd pulled at it without realizing. "I didn't want to ruin anything," he said, voice thin. Not broken, not dramatic, just tired. A 15-year-old shouldn't sound that tired. "You didn't ruin a thing," I told him. He nodded, but I could see he didn't believe it yet. The weight of other people's opinions had settled on his back the way it always did, quiet, heavy, familiar. Behind us, the doors of the venue swung open. My brother-in-law stepped out, loosened tie, jaw tight. He didn't shout across the lot. He didn't need to. "You could have just let her have this," he said. His voice carried just enough to hit us. "She wanted one day without complications." Eli flinched like the word itself stung. Caleb muttered something under his breath and took a step toward him, but I held out my arm. "Don't," I said. Caleb froze, chest rising fast, anger simmering just under the surface. I turned to my brother-in-law. "My son isn't a complication." He shrugged, hands up like he was being reasonable. "You made it one." Eli let out a quiet breath, the kind that slips out when someone's trying not to cry. That was enough. I opened the car door wider. "Get in," I said, softer this time. He climbed in without another word, pulling the seatbelt across his chest with a small, shaky exhale. The venue music drifted out through the open doors behind us. It felt wrong out here. Too bright, too cheerful, as if nothing had just happened. Caleb and Jonah settled in the back seat. I closed Eli's door gently. The sound landed like a final line drawn between us and the people still celebrating behind the glass. I walked around to the driver's side, but before I reached it, my Uncle Larry stepped out from the shadows near the walkway, hands in his pockets, shoulders hunched like he'd been debating whether to say something. He wasn't close to us, but he'd known Eli since he was little. He should have known better. "You didn't have to walk out," he said. His voice wasn't sharp. That almost made it worse. "Kids, they go through stages. You're feeding into it." That sentence landed heavier than any insult tonight. Not because it was loud, but because it was spoken like advice, like he thought he was saving us from ourselves. I felt the boys in the car shift at the sound of his voice. Eli's silhouette stiffened. I stopped a few feet from Larry. "This isn't a stage." He shook his head, small, pitying. "You'll regret letting him steer the ship." Behind me, Caleb cracked the car door open. "Don't talk about him like that," he shot out. His voice was steady, but the kind of steady that comes from holding back. Larry scoffed, not even looking at him. "You're too young to understand." I stepped between them. "Go back inside," I said. Larry's eyes narrowed. "So you're really choosing this over family?" The words were thin, almost whispered, but they hit like he'd thrown something. I took a slow breath. "I'm choosing my son." He opened his mouth to argue, but I turned away before he could shape the first word. When I slid into the driver's seat, Eli avoided my eyes, not out of shame, out of habit, the kind you learn after years of being questioned. I turned the key. The engine hummed to life. Jonah leaned forward, resting a hand on Eli's arm. Caleb stared out the window, jaw set hard. Before pulling out, I glanced at the bright windows of the venue. Inside, people were laughing, clinking glasses, carrying on like nothing had fractured. For a moment, the contrast felt almost surreal. Then I shifted into reverse. The lot lights cast long shadows as we drove away, stretching behind us like something we were finally leaving for good. The road out of the venue curved along a row of dark trees, their branches moving just enough in the wind to tap against each other. A soft, dull rhythm. Eli watched them through the window, forehead resting against the glass. Caleb kept glancing at him, subtle checks, making sure he was still holding together. Jonah sat between them, knees pulled up a little, like he was trying to take up less space. Halfway down the road, Eli spoke. Quiet. "I thought she liked me." His voice wasn't shaky, just small. A kind of small that comes from disappointment, not fear. I tightened my grip on the wheel. "She should have," I said. Eli's reflection in the window blinked, slow. "Maybe I shouldn't have come." Caleb leaned forward. "You didn't do anything wrong." Eli didn't answer. He kept looking outside, watching nothing in particular. Jonah added, "She shouldn't have put that card out. She knew exactly what she was doing." There was anger in his voice, but it wasn't loud. It was the kind that builds quietly, layer by layer. The headlights caught a patch of gravel as we turned onto the main road. The crunch under the tires filled the silence. I wanted to say more, to fix something, but there wasn't anything to fix, not tonight. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed in the console. Caleb grabbed it before I could look. He glanced at the screen and sighed. "It's from Aunt Linda." He turned it so I could see the message. "You embarrassed Marissa. She's crying. You need to apologize before you make this worse." Eli closed his eyes when he heard that. Not a flinch, just a quiet withdrawal, like he was folding into himself to avoid another cut. I reached over and placed a hand on his shoulder. Light pressure, a steady point in the dark. "You're not the one who should be sorry." He didn't say anything, but the corners of his mouth tightened, pulling upward just a little, the kind of half-expression kids make when they're trying not to fall apart in front of people they trust. We drove the rest of the way in silence, the kind that isn't empty, just tired, worn through, holding itself together until we got home. The house felt too quiet when we walked in, the kind of quiet that settles in after a long day, not peaceful, just used up. Caleb locked the door behind us. Jonah kicked off his shoes without looking down. Eli headed straight for the couch, but didn't sit. He hovered beside it, fingers tracing the edge of a cushion like he needed something steady to hold on to. I flipped on the small lamp in the corner, warm light, soft, enough to make the room feel less sharp. Eli finally sat, pulling his knees up, tucking his sleeves over his hands, the way he used to when he was younger. Caleb and Jonah dropped beside him. They didn't crowd him. They just existed next to him, which was the kind of comfort brothers learn without words. I sat on the armchair across from them. No one spoke for a moment. Then Eli broke the silence. "Do you think she hates me?" The way he asked, flat, matter of fact, cut deeper than if he'd cried. "No, Ace," I said, "but she doesn't understand you." "And she didn't try." He nodded, but his eyes drifted away, not convinced. Caleb leaned forward. "You didn't do anything wrong," he said again, firmer this time. Jonah added, "And leaving was the right call." The room settled into another pause, heavy but honest. Then Eli whispered, "I just want to be myself without fighting for it." His voice didn't waver. It didn't need to. The truth in it was enough. I moved to the couch and sat beside him, not touching at first, just being there. After a moment, he leaned lightly against my shoulder. Jonah rested his head on Eli's other side. Caleb placed a hand on Eli's back. There was a soft knock at the door. 3 slow taps. Caleb stiffened. Jonah tensed. Eli straightened but didn't fully pull away. I stood and walked toward the entryway. The knock came again. Same rhythm. I opened the door enough to see who it was. My cousin Linda stood on the step, arms crossed, expression tight. "Can we talk?" she said. Behind me, I heard Eli's breath hitch. Not fear, not surprise, just exhaustion, like he already knew this wasn't going to be an apology. I stepped outside, closing the door most of the way behind me. Linda didn't wait for me to say anything. She launched straight in, voice low but sharp enough to carry. "Marissa is devastated. She can barely breathe from crying. You walking out like that, it embarrassed her in front of everyone." She shook her head like she was delivering bad news I should have expected. "You need to fix this." I let her finish. The porch light hit her face from above, casting small shadows under her eyes, making her look more tired than angry, but her words were steady, practiced. Like she'd come here with a script. "She dead-named my son," I said. Linda's jaw tightened. "You know how she is. She didn't mean it like that." The way she dismissed it, quick, light, almost impatient, made something settle low in my chest. Eli's shoulders tightening in the living room behind me flashed through my mind. "She printed it on a place card," I said. "That wasn't an accident." Linda exhaled through her nose, slow, as if I was missing the point. "Look, maybe it wasn't perfect, but you could have handled it privately. You didn't need to storm out. People noticed." She lifted her chin. "They're saying you made the whole night about you." For a moment, I just stared at her. Not because her words shocked me, but because of how calmly she said them, like my son's dignity was negotiable. Like humiliation was acceptable if the room stayed comfortable. "Eli heard what you just said at the door," she blinked. "What did I say?" "You called his identity not perfect. You said his pain ruined a wedding." Silence slipped between us, thin but sharp. She looked away first. "I'm just trying to keep the peace," she muttered. "That peace came at his expense." Behind the door, I heard movement. Soft, careful. One of the boys shifting. Maybe all of them listening. Linda stepped back, crossing her arms. "If you leave this like it is, you're abandoning your family." I shook my head. "No, I'm protecting mine." She opened her mouth to argue, but the words didn't form. Instead, she frowned, turned, and walked down the steps without another glance. The sound of her heels faded into the dark, each step somehow lighter than the one before. Like she was relieved to be done with the conversation. I closed the door quietly behind me. The boys looked up from the couch. Eli didn't ask what she said. He didn't need to. I sat back down beside him. His sleeve brushed my arm. A small connection. A reminder of why every word tonight mattered. Eli shifted on the couch as I sat back down, scooting just a little closer without saying anything. Jonah tucked his feet under him, leaning into Caleb's shoulder. The room felt different now, still heavy, but steadier. Like the worst of the night had already passed, and we were sitting in the quiet that follows a storm. I turned the lamp down a notch. Its soft glow hit the edges of Eli's hair, the curve of his jaw, the place where his tie had twisted and stayed crooked. He finally looked at me, eyes tired but clearer than before. "Did she blame me?" he asked. I shook my head. "She blamed me." He pulled in a slow breath, held it, let it out. That's better, I guess. The corner of his mouth lifted at his own attempt at humor, small and fragile, but real enough that Jonah smiled back. Caleb asked, "What happens now?" He wasn't asking about weddings or family fights. He was asking about all of it. The meaning, the fallout, the next time someone tried to fold Eli back into a name that didn't belong to him. "We go on," I said, "and we don't let anyone shrink you." Eli looked down at his hands, sleeves covering his knuckles again. "I'm tired of fighting," he whispered. "Everywhere we go, it's like a test." Jonah reached for him without hesitating, resting his head lightly against Eli's shoulder. "You don't have to fight alone," Caleb added. "Yeah, we got you." Eli swallowed hard, then pressed the heel of his hand to his eyes just long enough to steady himself, not hiding, just catching his balance. Before any of us could say more, the house phone rang from the kitchen. Not loud, just enough to break the moment. We all froze. The caller ID screen glowed across the countertop. It was my mother's sister, another branch of the same family tree we'd walked away from tonight. Caleb muttered, "Seriously?" Jonah whispered, "Don't pick up." I didn't move. The phone rang again, steady, patient, each tone a reminder that even when you leave the room sometimes follows you home. Eli watched me, waiting to see what I'd do. I let it ring, and ring, and ring. Then the machine clicked on and a voice began to spill into the quiet. The voicemail played through the kitchen, tinny and too loud in the quiet house. My aunt's voice filled the space with that strained mix of concern and accusation people use when they want to sound loving, but still assign blame. "Daniel, sweetheart, I heard what happened. You can't let emotions run your home. Marissa is devastated. She says Eli made a scene and you encouraged it. Call me back. We need to talk about getting this under control." The message ended with a soft beep. No apology, no acknowledgement, just a demand wrapped in worry. Eli sank back against the couch cushion, not defeated, just worn. Caleb closed his eyes for a moment, jaw tight. Jonah whispered, "How do they not see?" I stood in the doorway between the kitchen and living room, staring at the phone like it had said something impossible. My aunt's tone looped in my head. Get this under control. As if my son's identity was a problem I'd failed to manage, as if he was an inconvenience we'd mishandled. I walked back to the boys. Eli's eyes followed me, waiting, not scared, just bracing for the next wave. I sat down beside him. "You didn't make a scene," I said. "You sat down, saw a name that wasn't yours, and stayed quiet. That's not chaos, that's restraint." He nodded, a small movement. "They don't want to understand," he said. The way he said it wasn't bitter. It was observational, like he'd accepted something he shouldn't have to understand at 15. Caleb shifted forward, elbows on his knees. "So what do we do now?" I looked at all three of them. Jonah leaning gently against Eli. Caleb watching me with the expectation of someone who's learned to measure the world by how the adults respond. "We choose us," I said. No thunder. No dramatic pause. Just a quiet truth spoken in a living room still carrying the weight of too many opinions. Eli's shoulders lowered a fraction. Caleb exhaled. Jonah nodded into Eli's sleeve. For the first time that night, the room felt like a place where we weren't bracing for impact. Then headlights swept across the front window, slow, creeping, pausing at the curb. Another car had pulled up. The car outside idled for a moment, engine low, the kind of sound that hangs in the air when someone isn't sure if they should stay or leave. Eli lifted his head. Caleb stood to look through the side of the curtain. Jonah stayed close to his brother, hand still resting on Eli's sleeve. Caleb moved the curtain back just enough to see. "It's Uncle Larry," he said. His voice carried a dull edge, not fear, not surprise. Just the knowledge that tonight wasn't done with us yet. I stood, and Eli's fingers tightened around the fabric of the couch for a second before he let go. I walked to the window. checked for myself. Larry sat in the driver's seat, shoulders squared, staring at the house like he was working up the nerve to come to the door. Then the engine cut off. Eli whispered, "Please don't let him in." Not a plea, not panic, just a tired request from a boy who'd run out of space for another conversation that asked him to shrink. "You won't have to see him," I said. A car door opened. Gravel shifted under his shoes as he walked up the path. Not fast, not hesitant, somewhere in between the pace of a man who thinks he's arriving with authority. Caleb positioned himself near the hall, ready to stand between Eli and the door if he needed to. Jonah moved closer to Eli, shoulder pressed lightly against his. The knock came, 3 solid taps. Not angry, not polite, expectant. I opened the door only halfway. Larry stood on the porch, hands tucked into the pockets of his jacket, eyes scanning my face like he was deciding how much force to use. "We need to talk," he said. "No," I answered. He blinked. "This is serious." "I know. That boy needs structure." "He has it. He needs the truth. He knows it." Larry shifted his weight, jaw tightening. "You walking out made our family look divided." I stepped forward, the door still between us. "We are divided." He exhaled through his nose, frustrated. "Daniel, you can't let a child dictate the tone of an entire wedding." Behind me, I heard the couch creak, Eli shrinking back without meaning to. Caleb's breath tightened. Jonah's foot tapped once, nervous energy he couldn't hide. I lowered my voice. He didn't dictate anything. He existed, and that was enough for all of you to fall apart. For the first time that night, Larry didn't have an answer ready. His mouth opened, then closed. His gaze drifted past me into the house, toward the 3 silhouettes behind the warm light. "Tell him," Larry said, quiet but firm. "Tell him to stop confusing people." I closed the door. Not hard, not loud, just final. Inside, Eli's breath caught in his throat, the sound small but raw. Caleb stepped to him instantly. Jonah wrapped both arms around his middle like anchoring him in place. I locked the door, and the house, for the first time all night, felt like ours again. Eli stayed in the circle of his brother's arms for a long moment, breathing unevenly, not crying. Just releasing the tension that had been pressed into him since the second he saw that place card. Jonah murmured something too soft for me to hear. Caleb rubbed the back of Eli's shoulder, slow and steady, grounding him. I stepped back to give them space. The living room felt warmer than it had earlier, like the lamp's glow finally reached the corners it couldn't touch before. Eli pulled away gently, wiping his face with the sleeve of his shirt, embarrassed for a moment until Caleb nudged him with a quiet, "Hey, it's okay." Eli nodded, swallowing hard, but the line of his mouth softened. Jonah sat cross-legged on the rug. "He's not coming back, right?" "No," I said. "Not tonight." Caleb let out a breath he'd been holding for minutes. "So, what now?" His voice was calmer than before. But underneath it was a question much bigger than the wedding, bigger than tonight. I sank into the armchair across from them. "Now we decide what our family looks like going forward." The words were simple, but the meaning settled into the room with weight. Eli looked up at me, eyes red but steady. "Do we cut them off?" He didn't say it with anger. He said it with exhaustion. I shook my head slowly. "We set boundaries, and we don't bend them for anyone." Eli looked down again. "They won't like that." "I'm not raising you to be liked," I said. "I'm raising you to be whole." The sentence hung in the air for a moment. Jonah blinked at it, absorbing it. Caleb nodded, almost imperceptibly. Eli's lips parted like he wanted to answer but didn't know how. Instead, he leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I don't want to spend my life proving myself," he whispered. "You don't have to," I said. "Not here, not with us." He inhaled, long and shaky, letting the breath stretch out before exhaling. Then he sat back, shoulders loosening for the first time all night. Caleb sank beside him on the couch, their arms brushing lightly. Jonah leaned against Eli's leg, head resting near his knee. For a moment, it was just quiet. Warm. The kind of quiet that comes when everyone in the room finally stops bracing. Then Eli looked up at me again. "Dad?" "Yeah?" "Thank you." Simple. Soft. He didn't have to explain it. I didn't need him to. A small knock echoed from the back of the house, a gentle, irregular tapping against the window near the kitchen. We all tensed for a second, but then Jonah exhaled. "It's the wind," he said, half smiling. And this time, it really was. Eli stretched his legs out on the couch, letting them settle across the cushion like he was finally letting his body unclench. Caleb grabbed a blanket from the armrest and tossed it over him without ceremony. Jonah curled into the corner of the sofa, head tipped against the backrest. The storm of the night had quieted into something gentler, something that felt almost like safety. I moved to the kitchen to get water for everyone. The glasses clinked softly when I set them on the counter. Eli's voice drifted in from the living room. "Do you think they'll talk about us?" Caleb answered before I could. "They already do, but who cares?" Eli didn't respond. Jonah chimed in. "They're the ones who acted weird, not us." I brought the water back and set the glasses on the coffee table. As Eli reached for his, I noticed the faint tremor in his fingers. Not fear, just the body catching up to everything the heart had been carrying. He steadied the glass with both hands, took a slow sip, then set it down again. "We don't owe them anything," I said. "Not explanations, not apologies." Eli looked at me, eyes softer now. "I wish they saw me." "I do," I said. Caleb added, "We do." Jonah rested his head against Eli's shoulder. "Always." The weight in the room shifted, not gone, but lighter. Outside, a car drove past, headlights sweeping across the curtains in a slow arc. No one flinched this time. It wasn't for us. Eli leaned back into the couch, blanket pulled up to his chest. "It sucks," he said quietly, "being treated like I'm wrong for existing." I sat beside him, close enough that our shoulders touched. "You're not wrong," I said. "The people who can't see you clearly, that's their limitation, not your identity." He nodded, more certain than earlier. "I just don't want tonight to define anything." "It won't," I said. "It's just a moment, and we get to choose what comes after." Jonah yawned, loud and unfiltered, breaking the heaviness. Caleb snorted. Eli cracked a small smile. For the first time since we walked into that wedding hall, it felt like the night had finally taken its hands off my son. He sank deeper into the couch, eyelids heavier, shoulders lower. "Can we stay like this a bit?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, "as long as you need." And for a while, none of us moved. The house settled into a soft quiet, the kind that only comes when everyone is finally breathing at the same pace. Eli pulled the blanket higher, tucking it under his chin. Caleb shifted to sit on the floor beside the couch, leaning his back against it. Jonah stretched out, legs dangling off the edge, comfortable in the way only a kid who feels safe can be. I dimmed the lamp a little more. The room warmed into a softer gold. Eli stared at the ceiling. "Dad?" "Yeah?" "Do you think she meant to hurt me? Or was it just thoughtless?" His voice hovered in that fragile middle place between wanting the truth and wanting comfort. I sat beside him. "I think she cared more about her perfect plan than about the people in it." Eli nodded, eyes lowering. "So it wasn't about me?" "It was," I said gently, "but not because of who you are, because of what she refused to see." He let that settle. Jonah toyed with the corner of the blanket. Caleb cracked his knuckles quietly, a habit he picked up when thinking too hard. Eli whispered, "It's weird. I didn't cry at the wedding. I felt like I was floating outside myself." "That's what happens when something crosses your boundary," I said. "Your mind steps back to protect you." He exhaled slow. It felt cold. "Cold means you're surviving," I said. "Warmth comes after." Eli leaned into my side again. Jonah curled closer. Caleb rested his head back against the cushion behind Eli. For a moment, everything was still. Then another vibration buzzed from my phone on the table. Not a call this time, just a text. Caleb grabbed it, checked the screen, and looked up at me. "It's from Marissa," he said. "You might want to see this." Caleb handed me the phone without a word. I took it, feeling Eli shift beside me, his shoulders tensing in a way he probably thought I wouldn't notice. The message preview glowed softly on the lock screen. "You ruined everything. You need to fix what you did." No greeting, no question, no sign she understood even a fraction of what happened. I opened the message. There was more. "I didn't do anything wrong. You overreacted. Bring the boys tomorrow so we can talk like adults." I stared at the words for a moment, the room quiet except for Jonah's soft breathing and the hum of the refrigerator down the hall. Eli didn't ask what she wrote. He just stared at my hands, waiting for whatever truth I would put into the air. Caleb whispered, "Are you going to answer?" "No," I said. Eli blinked slowly, letting the meaning sink in. Jonah straightened, watching me. Caleb nodded once, like he'd been quietly hoping for that. I locked the phone and set it face down on the table. "She's not ready to hear anything real," I said. "If we show up tomorrow, it'll be the same conversation in a different room." Eli rubbed his palms against his jeans, grounding himself. "What if she tells everyone I made you leave?" "She already did," I said, "and it doesn't make it true." His breath caught, sharp but steady. "I don't want this to follow me forever." "It won't," I said. "People talk the loudest when they're avoiding their own guilt." Jonah reached over and touched Eli's knee. "We know what happened," he said. "That's enough." It wasn't everything, but it was something. Eli leaned back into the couch again. The fatigue of the night settled into his posture. Not heavy, just honest. Then he whispered, "I don't want to see her for a while." "You don't have to," I said. Caleb shifted closer, bumping his shoulder gently against his brother's. Jonah mirrored the motion on the other side. Eli let out a long breath, not shaky this time, just letting go. Outside, another car passed, headlights sliding across the ceiling before fading. None of us moved. None of us looked toward the window. The night felt contained now, pulled back into the walls of this house where it couldn't hurt him anymore. Eli shifted the blanket down to his lap, finally letting his arms rest on top of it instead of hiding underneath. A small sign, but I caught it. Caleb did too. He eased back against the couch with a slow exhale, the kind that says, "Okay, he's stabilizing." Jonah stretched his legs out, toes brushing the edge of the coffee table. I got up and grabbed a box of tissues from the hallway shelf. When I set it on the table, Eli gave a little laugh, thin, tired, but real. "You think I'm going to cry now?" "No," I said. "But you deserve the option." He nodded, a quiet acknowledgement that he understood what I meant. Jonah nudged him. "Can we watch something? Something dumb?" Eli considered it, then shrugged. "Maybe later." Caleb leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Dad, are they going to try to make you apologize?" "Probably," I said. "People who refuse accountability usually expect others to carry it for them." Eli looked down again. "She wanted me in a dress," he said, voice low. Not complaining, stating, facing it. I sat beside him. "She wanted you to be someone you're not. That's different." He nodded, the tightness in his jaw easing. It felt like she wanted to erase me. "She didn't succeed," I said. "You stood your ground. Even when you didn't say anything, you stood your ground." Eli swallowed, then whispered, "It hurt." "I know." Silence settled again, but this time it didn't stretch. It softened. Then Caleb said, "Can we do something tomorrow? Just us?" Jonah perked up. "Ice cream." Eli gave the smallest smile. "Maybe." I looked at them, 3 boys trying to rebuild a night they never asked to break. "Yeah," I said. "Tomorrow is ours." Eli leaned his head back against the cushions. For the first time all night, he didn't look alert or guarded, just present. Then my phone buzzed again on the table, a different tone, a long one. Caleb checked it, hesitated, and turned the screen toward me. "It's Grandma's sister," he said quietly. "She sent a voice message." Eli's shoulders tense, not from fear, but from exhaustion. The kind that comes from bracing for another blow. I picked up the phone, pressed play, and held it between us. The message began with a breath. "Daniel, I heard about tonight, and I need to tell you something." Her voice didn't sound angry. It sounded old and tired, and nothing like the others. The voice on the message wavered, not with anger, but with the weight of someone choosing each word carefully. "Daniel, I wasn't there tonight, but I heard enough to understand something has gone very wrong in this family. And before everyone tells their version, I want to hear yours." Eli shifted upright, blanket pulled at his waist. Jonah leaned closer to the phone. Caleb stayed still, eyes narrowed, listening for the tone behind the words. "I remember that boy when he was small," she continued. "He was bright. He was tender. And he was always himself, even when he didn't have the language for it yet." A pause, not dramatic, just thoughtful. "If he has found that language now, you protect it, even from us." Eli's breath caught, soft, barely there, but enough. "I'm not calling to scold you," she said. "I'm calling because the rest of them, they only see the moment. They don't see the child. They don't see the years. They don't see what it costs a person to grow into who they are." The message crackled for a second, like the phone had shifted in her hand. "You did right by him tonight. Most parents don't. Most are too afraid of noise or judgment or tradition. You were not. So if they're giving you trouble, let them. You did what a father is supposed to do." Eli pressed a hand to his mouth, eyes watering even though he tried to blink it back. Caleb stared at him, stunned. Jonah whispered, "Finally." The message ended with a small exhale. "Call me when you're ready. I'm not on their side. I'm on his." The beep sounded. The phone fell silent. Eli looked down, wiped his cheek with the back of his hand, then gave a shaky laugh. "I didn't expect that." "You deserved at least one person seeing you," I said. Caleb slid closer and pulled Eli into a hug, firm, grounding. Jonah piled on a second later, arms wrapped tight, and in that moment, surrounded by his brothers, something in Eli finally released. Not a breakdown, not a collapse, just a long breath that left his body like he'd been holding it for years. "We're okay," he whispered. "We are," I said. "Tonight didn't break us. It clarified us." Outside, the wind brushed lightly against the window. Nothing sharp, nothing alarming. Just a quiet reminder that the world kept moving, even when families faltered. Inside, the room held steady around us. Eli leaned back, wiping the last dampness from under his eyes with the heel of his hand. Caleb kept an arm around him, and Jonah rested his chin lightly on Eli's shoulder. The three of them looked like they were finally exhaling together, the tension that had wrapped around the night beginning to unspool at the edges. I set the phone down on the table. Its screen dimmed, fading back into silence. For the first time since we stepped into that reception hall, the quiet in the room didn't feel like something we had to brace against. It felt earned. Eli spoke first. "Do we have to call her back?" "Not tonight," I said. "Tomorrow?" "When you're ready," I answered. "Not before." He nodded, sinking deeper into the couch. The blanket draped around him like a shield he finally didn't have to hold up. Jonah reached for the remote, but didn't turn the TV on. He just held it, like he liked the idea of having something normal at his fingertips. Caleb stretched his legs out across the rug, leaning back against the couch, his eyes drifting between me and Eli. "Dad," Caleb said after a moment, "is it always going to be like this? People pushing us to explain him?" "No," I said. "Not always. Some people learn. Some don't. But we don't shrink to make them comfortable. Eli closed his eyes at that, letting the words settle. Jonah slid down until he was half lying against him, soft and warm. The room dimmed a little as a cloud passed over the moon. The shadows shifted across the wall, slow and harmless. Eli opened his eyes again, gaze following the movement. "I don't want to lose everyone," he whispered. "You won't lose us," I said. "And anyone who makes you choose between being yourself and belonging," Caleb added, "isn't someone worth keeping." Eli gave a small, crooked smile. "You sound like Dad." Caleb smirked. "Someone has to." Jonah nudged Eli. "You got 3 of us. That's more than most people get." Eli laughed, a short, quiet sound, but real. I stood and crossed the room to close the curtains. The fabric fell into place with a soft sweep, shutting out the last of the night. When I turned back, all 3 boys were looking at me, not waiting for instruction, just present. "You're safe here," I said. Eli nodded, deeper this time. "I feel that." I sat back down, and the room settled with me. A new kind of stillness, not heavy, not haunted. Just a family realigning around the truth of who one of us is and who all of us are because of it. Eli shifted the blanket off his shoulders, letting it fall into his lap as if the weight of it no longer matched the weight inside him. Jonah slid down until his head rested against Eli's side, eyes half closed. Caleb stretched his arms over his head with a long sigh, the kind that comes after hours of holding everything tight. I walked to the kitchen and grabbed a small stack of cookies, leftovers from earlier in the week, and set the plate on the coffee table. Jonah perked up immediately. "Finally," he whispered. Eli gave him a faint smile, the kind that said the night hadn't taken everything from him. We each took one. For a moment, the room felt almost normal again. Soft, warm, familiar. Then Eli said, "Dad, what if they don't talk to us anymore?" I sat back, brushing crumbs from my palm. "Then that tells us who they really were to begin with." Caleb nodded. "If they cared, they wouldn't make this about the wedding," Jonah added, "or about their feelings." Eli looked down at the cookie in his hand, rolling it between his fingers. "I don't want to hate them." "You don't have to," I said, "but you are allowed to step away." He considered that for a long moment, breathing steady, eyes fixed on the plate. "It felt like the whole room saw me wrong," he whispered. "Like I was the problem." "You weren't," I said. "The problem was their comfort coming before your identity." He swallowed, then looked at Caleb. "Did I embarrass you?" Caleb blinked, stunned. "You? Never." Jonah shook his head, emphatic. "Not once." Eli's posture softened. "Okay." A small word, but heavy with relief. I leaned back into the couch beside him. Tonight wasn't about shame, it was about clarity, and clarity always feels harsh at first. Eli rested his head briefly on my shoulder before pulling back. "I'm glad we left," he murmured. "So am I said. The house creaked gently as the wind shifted outside. A normal sound, a settling sound. Eli tapped his fingers on the blanket. "Can we just stay together a little longer?" "Yeah," Caleb said. "Obviously." Jonah added, "I'm not moving." Eli laughed quietly, soft, tired, but warm. Then he leaned into both of them at once, shoulders dropping, breath evening out. And for the first time since the place card hit the table, he looked at peace. We sat like that, the 4 of us, letting the night unwind around us without demanding anything more. Eli shifted closer, his shoulder brushing mine, the kind of quiet gesture that carries more weight than words. Caleb draped the blanket across the 3 of them without asking. Jonah tucked his feet under himself and leaned into the curve of Eli's side. The room had its own rhythm now, slow, steady, healing. I turned off the hallway light, leaving only the lamp's soft glow. The shadows along the wall eased into a gentler shape. Eli watched them for a moment, blinking slow. "Do you think they'll try again?" he asked. To fix tonight? Caleb said. To fix me, Eli whispered. I sat forward. You're not broken, so there's nothing for them to fix. Eli nodded, but his fingers twisted the blanket's edge the way they used to when he was younger. Jonah placed his hand over Eli's, steadying it. You don't have to change anything to fit them, Jonah said. Caleb added, They're the ones missing out, not you. Eli's grip loosened. After a quiet moment, he asked, Do I make your life harder? His voice barely carried across the space between us, but every word landed with precision. No, I said. You make it honest. Caleb leaned his head back against the cushion, looking at me, then at Eli. I look up to you, he said. Jonah nodded. Me too. You always know who you are. I'm still figuring out my favorite cereal. Eli let out a small laugh, shaking his head, but his eyes softened. I shifted on the couch. You didn't ruin a wedding tonight. You revealed one. Eli blinked, not fully understanding. A room where people cared more about a script than the people in it, I said. You didn't break that. It was already cracked. Eli breathed in, slow, letting the words settle somewhere deeper than the surface. Jonah yawned loudly, the sound echoing just enough to make Caleb snort. Eli smiled wider this time, the fatigue easing off him like something finally unclenching. He lay back against the cushions, Jonah curling at his side, Caleb leaning in close. Their breathing synced again, the kind of natural alignment families fall into when they stop bracing. I dimmed the lamp until only a soft halo remained. Eli whispered, This feels right. It is, I said. The house held the quiet in place, nothing pressing at the walls, nothing demanding to be solved tonight. Just us. And for the first time all day, that was enough. Jonah shifted in his spot, curling a little closer to Eli as the room settled deeper into quiet. Caleb stretched his legs out, crossing them at the ankles, the tension finally leaving his shoulders. Eli leaned back into the couch, his body no longer pulled tight, no longer bracing for the next blow. The blanket had slipped halfway down his lap, and he didn't bother fixing it. That alone told me more than any words. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. You don't have to think about them tonight, I said. Eli nodded slowly. I'm trying. You're doing enough, I told him. He looked at the ceiling. It's strange. Part of me keeps replaying it. The name card, her voice, the way she looked at me. It's like pieces stuck to me. That's what happens when someone crosses your boundary, I said. Your mind tries to make sense of it. Does it ever stop replaying? Yes, I said. When you replace it with what's real. Caleb reached over and tapped Eli's shoe gently. What's real is that you're Eli. That's it. Jonah whispered, and we're here, and we're not going anywhere. Eli's eyes softened. I like that. The house creaked again, settling into the night. Nothing sharp, nothing unsettling. Just the sound of old wood breathing. I stood and walked to the window, looking out through the small gap where the curtain didn't fully meet the wall. The street was empty. The car that had sat outside earlier was long gone. Only the street lamp remained, casting a soft glow on the pavement. I let the curtain fall back into place and returned to the couch. Eli shifted to make room without thinking, a small gesture that said he wanted me close. I sat beside him, the cushion dipping under our combined weight. Tonight doesn't define you, I said. Or us. Eli leaned his head against the back cushion, eyes half closed. It feels like it tried to. It did, I said, but it failed. Caleb nodded. Completely failed. Jonah added, like, embarrassingly failed. Eli let out a real laugh this time, soft, warm, genuine. I watched the corners of his mouth lift. That sound, I said quietly, is the only thing I care about right now. Eli wiped his eyes again, but this time the gesture wasn't heavy. I'm okay, he said. You're getting there, I corrected. and that's enough." He leaned back into the couch, this time letting his head rest against my arm. The room settled into a stillness that felt right. A stillness earned. A stillness we weren't going to let anyone take from us again. Eli shifted again. But not from tension, just settling deeper into the couch, finding the spot where his body finally felt like it could rest. Caleb adjusted the blanket, pulling it up over Eli's legs without saying anything. Jonah folded his arms across his chest and leaned into Eli's side, eyes blinking slower with each minute. I glanced at the clock. It was later than I expected, but none of us were in any hurry to end this. The night had taken enough from him. It didn't get to take the calm, too. Eli broke the silence first. "Dad? Yeah? Did I make you choose?" His voice wasn't shaky, just wondering, like he was testing the edges of a thought he wasn't sure he should have. I shook my head. "No, you didn't make me choose. You showed me where the line needed to be." He exhaled long and steady. "I don't want to be the reason things fall apart." "You're the reason things are clear," I said. "There's a difference." Caleb murmured, "Big difference." Jonah nodded. "A huge difference." Eli glanced at both of them, the corners of his mouth tugging upward just a little. "Thanks." I sat back, letting the quiet return. The kind of quiet that doesn't press, the kind that fills a room without taking anything from it. A soft thump sounded from upstairs, the heater kicking on. Just a normal sound. Eli didn't flinch this time. Jonah didn't tense. Caleb didn't look toward the stairs. The night had finally stopped feeling like something might break. Eli asked, "Do you think, later, when things are calmer, I should talk to her?" "When you're ready," I said. "Not when they demand it. Not when they guilt you into it. When you feel steady." He nodded. "I don't feel steady yet." "You don't have to," I said. "Tonight is about landing." Caleb stretched his legs out again. "We can take tomorrow to just be us." Jonah chimed in. "Ice cream, movies, and absolutely no weddings allowed." Eli smiled. "Sounds perfect." He yawned, long and quiet, leaning his head against my arm without thinking. I didn't move. I let him settle. Jonah's eyes were already half closed. Caleb rested his head on the back of the couch. The house felt full and soft and right. "Dad," Eli whispered. "Yeah? I'm glad you're mine." My breath tightened, not in pain, but in that rare kind of feeling you only get when something broken starts fitting back into place. "I'm glad you're mine too," I said. And for a moment, none of us spoke. None of us needed to. The room held us the way the world hadn't tonight, gently, steadily, without asking us to shrink or apologize. Eli's breathing slowed into a softer rhythm, the kind that only comes when the body finally stops guarding itself. Caleb leaned his head back, eyes closing but not fully asleep. Jonah shifted down until he was curled against Eli's side, arms tucked beneath the blanket. The living room felt like a small shelter carved out of a long, difficult day. I reached over and tightened the blanket around all three of them. Eli didn't open his eyes, but I saw the faintest ease ripple through his posture, like his body recognized the gesture even before his mind did. Caleb opened one eye. "Dad? Are we still going to be okay tomorrow, when the calls start again?" "Yes," I said, "because we decide what tomorrow looks like. Not them." He closed his eye again, settling deeper into the couch. Eli whispered, "I don't want to think about them." "You don't have to tonight," I said, "and tomorrow you don't have to pick up." He nodded slow, almost sleepy. "Good." Jonah mumbled something unintelligible against Eli's sleeve, half a word, half a sigh, and Eli huffed out a tiny smile. I dimmed the lamp until only a soft halo of light hugged the edges of the room. Eli's face relaxed. Caleb's breathing deepened. Jonah's curls brushed the blanket as he shifted in sleep. I sat back and let the quiet expand, warm and unhurried. After a few minutes, Eli spoke again, eyes still closed. "Dad? Yes? Thank you for not letting them rewrite me." The words were soft, barely above a whisper, but they carried the weight of everything he'd held in tonight. I placed my hand on his back, gentle pressure. "No one gets to rename you," I said. "Not now. Not ever." His shoulders loosened completely then, the last bit of tension slipping out of his body like the room had finally given him permission to rest. A low hum from the heater drifted through the house. Jonah's soft breathing filled the space beside him. Caleb's hand slipped under the blanket, fingers brushing Eli's arm in a quiet reminder that he wasn't alone. The four of us stayed like that, held in a moment that felt both fragile and unbreakable. I watched Eli's face as sleep pulled him under. Peaceful, safe, fully himself. And I stayed awake a little longer, making sure the night stayed gentle around him. If this reminded you of moments inside your own home, you can share below.